Sylvia Lim.
Thank you, Speaker. I have one clarification for Minister Ong Ye Kung. Earlier in his speech, he referred to the case which I cited about the two economists 15 years ago. And according to his analysis, he mentioned that in order to qualify as an actionable POFMA untruth, there are two gates to pass. And his assessment was that in that scenario, gate 1 was not passed because there was no falsehood to begin with. Now, if I recall the facts of that case, the economists had relied on some data which later the government said was incomplete, and they had asserted, based on the data, that out of 4 jobs that were created, only 1 job went to a Singapore resident and 3 jobs went to the intake of foreigners. So I'm just wanting some clarification, because when you look at that statement alone about job creation, it appears on one reading to be an assertion of fact, which later on the government came to correct and said it's not correct. In actual fact, out of 10 jobs, 9 went to residents. And on one reading of POFMA, it could be argued, that Gate 1 has been passed because there is an assertion of some facts which are not correct, and Gate 2 possibly may be passed as well because this may diminish confidence in the government in job creation. So I'd like Minister to clarify again, which is very helpful I think earlier, but I think we need more explanation about how he sees the case and why POFMA would not apply. Does it mean that if researchers conclude facts based on incomplete data, that will not come under POFMA, even though factually it has to be corrected?
Yes, I got you. No, I'm prepared to explain this and be recorded in the Hansard, because their conclusion that most of the jobs went to foreigners, that's a conclusion of the study. And how they based that conclusion on was on data, although incomplete, it's not fabricated, it's not falsified. So there is no falsification and no falsehood involved. And as for the conclusion that most jobs went to foreigners, that is their conclusion and their opinion, which is also not part of POFMA. So long as researchers abide by research discipline, I do not see how they can be caught by POFMA unless they fabricated data.
Professor Lim Sun Sun.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Minister, for your effort to assure the academic community. I just have one point of clarification as well as some feedback. So, in the first instance, I think you mentioned the distinction between the empirical disciplines as well as humanities, which you say is not so empirical, but is interpretive and critical. So, I do not think my humanities and social science colleagues will forgive me if I let you get away with saying that humanities and social science research is not empirical. So that would just be a point of clarification. So the second point actually relates to the use of the term public harm, which I think at this point in the discussion is somewhat confusing, because we have actually been discussing the bill which uses the term public interest. So I think that may actually create more issues of contention, because there is a great deal of academic research that, while being of public interest, may not necessarily generate public harm. So the third point is actually to deal with Honourable Member Dr. Intan's suggestion that we should actually set up in universities possibly committees that actually help us to review whether or not these are actually falsehoods that have been made by academics, perhaps unwittingly, and that these committees can help to advise the ministers. While on the one hand I'm sympathetic to that argument as a fellow academic, on the other hand I think the very establishment as well as existence of such committees will in fact seem to underline the lack of academic freedom, which I think would be an unhealthy signal to send.
First, being a quantitative economist myself, I very much welcome humanities to use more data and empirical evidence. That's one. Two, your point on public interest versus public harm is taken. I've given some illustrations of what I think is the measure of public harm before POFMA kicks in. And I'm sure my colleagues will explain further. Third, on committees to decide what is falsehoods within university. I think they already exist, because that entire discipline of doing good research, peer review, academic councils, already make sure that all academics do their work properly, using proper data, don't fabricate facts, and you stick to that. I don't see how POFMA will catch you.
Associate Professor Daniel Goh.
Thank you, Minister. I'm going to drag you back to the 2003 example. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I think it's still kind of fresh in the minds of many academics in Singapore about how we interface with society, with the state. And I should declare that I'm a NUS professor. So let me ask two clarifications. The first one is I'm not so sure that the characterization that what the two economists said would not have come under POFMA, because there was some kind of correction that was done in 2003. And I'm going to just read off the Channel News Asia article, which quotes Minister of Manpower then, Dr. Ong Ye Kung, who said, if your figures are wrong, it is irresponsible, unprofessional to put out those figures. In this particular case, the NTU report, their findings are way off the mark. I do not know how they got their figures and what the methods are, said Dr. Ong. And he added that the NTU academics had not consulted the Manpower Ministry or the Department of Statistics. So that is as good as a correction, I think, in the pre-POFMA era. And I mean, after that, there was a big controversy, and I mean, the issue blew up, and all the academics knew that these two academics were being corrected by the minister. It was a high-level rebuke. That was the phrase that was used in the newspaper article. And my second clarification is that I can appreciate, I think, your more open view about academic research because you are the Minister of Education. This is your domain expertise. But here, as in this case with the labor economists, they were commenting on something that has to do, you know, in terms of public interest, has to do with the Ministry of Manpower. So the Minister of Manpower reacts to their remarks, right? So it's a different ministry that is involved in evaluating the academics research. So is this going to be a kind of blanket, I don't know, rule or norm within the cabinet that when it comes to academics, consult the Minister of Education first?
Right. I have no intention to reopen the 2003 case and go through the data to see whether there were any falsified data. I think that is past. That is past. But it's obvious that the Manpower Minister then did not agree with the conclusion of the research report. That does not equal to it will be caught under POFMA today. That is why I differentiate between research and activism. That please expect us, even when POFMA doesn't apply to research, please expect us, if we do not agree with the outcome, to present other data, present our arguments, and try to correct public perceptions and try to convince the public otherwise. That is political discourse. It cannot be that just because it's a research piece, we all have to shut up. It is not in the spirit of POFMA, nor the political discourse that we want. On the point that I'm Minister for Education, so I'm slightly more open, and whether all these cases concerning research will go through me, I think it should, based on how the law is written today. But based on the Workers' Party suggestion, I'm afraid it will go to the court.
Associate Professor Walter Tessera.
Thank you, Speaker. First, really let me congratulate the Minister for Education on that speech. I really think it should be actually sent out to all our academics because I think it was a really good policy statement besides POFMA. Just one clarification. I think we all accept the need for the government to rebut robustly research they don't agree with, whether from academics or activists. What I'm concerned about, which I talked a bit in my speech earlier, is that there's been a trend sometimes of ministries using language in their rebuttal that implies, falsehood. And I think when you look at the details of the case, it's not always the case for all of these, that there's really a dispute about the facts. Sometimes it's more about conclusion. And I would hope he has some views on maybe asking his colleagues or ministries to tighten up a bit in their language so that people don't inadvertently think things are false when they're actually not, you see. Thank you.
I take your point. There's one value of this discourse that we have in this chamber, that we are now a lot more careful what is a disagreement and what is a falsehood. And I think this law crystallized it, and we should be more disciplined in future.